lesson, Absalom's insurrection, David's darkest hour. I thought maybe a subtitle might be something like, When Things Just Keep Getting Worse, because that's basically what we see happening here. Remember the prophecy that Nathan the prophet told David when he confronted him after his sin with Bathsheba and Uriah, her husband. He said, "Now therefore the sword shall never depart from thine house. Behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house. The Lord also hath put away thy sin," there's forgiveness, "thou shalt not die. However," and now we're looking at the however part. Although God has assured David that his sin is forgiven, natural consequences continue to develop. Important lesson there for you and me. God forgives our sins, but the natural consequences of our sin may continue. Things keep getting worse for the man who has put his trust in God. How will it all end? Well, let's start at chapter 14 now. We find that Joab is going to try to reconcile the father David with his son Absalom. Verse 39 said, "The soul of the king David longed to go forth unto Absalom, who is living in exile with his grandfather, the king of this little kingdom of Geshur. For David was comforted concerning Amnon, seeing he was dead." What to do about the wickedness of his son Amnon? Well, that's taken care of now that he's dead. Joab is aware of what's going on. In chapter 14, verse 1, Joab, the son of Zeruiah, this David's general, perceived that the king's heart was toward Absalom. So Amnon's death has solved a problem for David. Absalom is now the oldest son. He's the hereditary heir to the throne. So Joab, being a very good political general, he's motivated to secure the goodwill of both the father and the son, the future king. And so he seeks to reconcile them, and he recruits a smart woman to play a role. Verse 2, "And Joab sent to Tekoa, a small village in the tribe of Judah, and fetched thence a wise woman, and said unto her, I pray thee, feign thyself to be a mourner, and put on now mourning apparel." I don't know what that looked like, but it was obvious that she was going to be mourning someone's death. "And anoint not thyself with oil," don't fix yourself up, "but be as a woman that had a long time mourned for the dead." So this is some woman known for her high intelligence. In verse 3, he goes on to instruct her, "Come to the king, and speak on this manner unto him." So Joab put words in her mouth. So she's to pretend to be a woman in mourning, and she's going to tell King David the story that Joab is giving her. Well, she plays her role to perfection, verses 4 on through 17. "And when the woman of Tekoa spake to the king, she fell on her face to the ground, and did obeisance, and said, Help, O king. And the king said unto her, What aileth thee? And she answered, I am indeed a widow woman, and mine husband is dead. And thy handmaid had 2 sons, and they strove together in the field, and there was none to part them. But the one smote the other and slew him. And behold, the whole family is risen against thine handmaid. And they said, Deliver him that smote his brother, that we may kill him, for the life of his brother whom he slew. And we will destroy the heir also, and so they shall quench my coal which is left, and shall not leave to my husband neither name nor remainder upon the earth. Okay, so this is the story. Recap. She's a widow. Her 2 sons got in a fight. Nobody was around to separate them. And the one killed the other. Now, the relatives are insisting that absolute justice be done, that the surviving son be executed for the murder of his brother. Of course, this gets us into the law of Moses, which stated that anyone who killed someone else should die for it, unless, of course, it was by accident or unintentional. She might argue that this was unintentional. One brother wasn't trying to kill the other, but they were fighting a brutal fight, obviously, in her story. But anyway, now she has only one son left. If they execute him, that would end the family legacy and leave her destitute as a widow with no one to care for her in her old age. So in this type of world, in the old days, people could come before the king. He was the supreme authority in the land. And if no one else would hear, they could go to the king. And the king had to deal with lots and lots of people every day. And of course, he had a system set up for hearing them, screening the people who would want to come and see him, and admitting those that he thought he could, just like our U.S. Supreme Court decides which cases they will hear or not hear. And he hears this woman, and she tells this sad, sad story. Verse 8, and the king said unto the woman, go to thine house, go back home, and I will give charge concerning thee. I will assign someone to your case, in other words, that will take care of this and fix it for you. And the woman of Tekoa said unto the king, my lord, O king, the iniquity be on me and on my father's house, and the king and his throne be guiltless. What is she worried about here? She's worried that someone come to her and say, you have gone to the king and you have harbored a murderer, and you need to pay for this. She says, let the guilt be on me and not on you, O king. If you do this, God will hold me guilty, not you. Verse 10, the king said, whosoever saith aught unto thee, bring him to me, and he shall not touch thee any more. So he's promising to give her legal protection if any of these relatives try to make her liable for not allowing her son to be executed. Then said she, verse 11, I pray thee, let the king remember the Lord thy God. The idea there in remember the Lord thy God is to invoke him. In other words, she wants David to swear by God that this will be done. Remember the Lord thy God, that thou wouldest not suffer the revengers of blood to destroy any more, lest they destroy my son. And he said, as the Lord liveth, there he invokes the Lord, there shall not one hair of thy son fall to the earth. By the surest oath possible, he ensures that he will protect her son's life. So verse 12, the woman goes on to the next step. Then the woman said, let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak one word unto my lord the king. There's a change in tone here. Up until now, she's a pleading supplicant, but now she's asking the king, may I tell you something? May I tell you something you should do, in other words? What is it? Then the woman said, I pray thee, let me speak a word unto the Lord my king. And he said, say on. Okay, he gave her permission to tell him what to do. And the woman said, wherefore then hast thou thought such a thing against the people of God? For the king doth speak this thing as one which is faulty, or who is faulty, in that the king doth not fetch home again his banished. For we must needs die, and as our water spilt on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again, neither doth God respect any person. Yet doth he devise means that his banished be not expelled from him. So what she's saying here is, King, how can you do this when you are leaving your own son Absalom living in exile over there in Geshur? People will not support you in protecting my son if you're not even going to protect your own son and restore him from exile. If you leave him banished, well, that would invalidate your promise to me. We count for nothing in verse 14, that's the point. Yet, even though we are nothing in God's eyes, yet God still, in his mercy, will limit banishment. This is a big deal to an Israelite. David in the Psalms talks about how horrible it was to be banished from the presence of God when he's in the wilderness, running from King Saul. So, she goes on to say that she's very sure that David will do the right thing, and she says this in a very flattering manner. Verse 15, now therefore that I am come to speak of this thing unto my lord the king, it is because the people have made me afraid. And thy handmaid said, I will now speak unto the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his handmaid. So, your majesty, they're all watching to see what you're going to do. And so, in other words, she's implying that if you will have your own son restored back to fellowship, then they will see, yes, he's going to back up what I am telling them about protecting my son from their desire to have him put away. Verse 16, for the king will hear to deliver his handmaid out of the hand of the man that would destroy me and my son together, out of the inheritance of God, which is like Absalom. He's up there in Geshur. Thine handmaid said, the word of my lord the king shall be now comfortable, for as an angel of God, so is my lord the king to discern good and bad. Therefore, the Lord thy God will be with thee. Well, David is no dummy. And he recognizes right away there's something a little fishy here. And so he says to the woman, verse 18, then the king answered and said unto the woman, hide not from me, I pray thee, the thing that I shall ask thee. Tell me the truth. And the woman said, let my lord the king now speak. And the king said, is not the hand of Joab with thee in all this? He knows Joab. He knows what's going on. Maybe Joab is even standing in the background somewhere to witness how this goes. And David gets it all figured out right away what's really going on. And the woman answered and said, as thy soul liveth, my lord the king, none can turn to the right hand or to the left from aught that my lord the king has spoken. For thy servant Joab, he bade me, and he put all these words in the mouth of thine handmaid, to fetch about this form of speech hath thy servant Joab done this thing, and my Lord is wise, according to the wisdom of an angel of God, to know all things that are in the earth. Flattery may get you somewhere. So he asks if it isn't Joab putting up the story, and she, in a very flattering terms, confesses to the king, yep, you got it right. So David takes to heart what she has said, and he gives orders to Joab to bring Absalom back. Verse 21, the king said to Joab, behold now, I have done this thing. Go therefore, bring the young man Absalom again. Joab accepts this with a show of extreme respect. Joab fell to the ground on his face on the floor of the palace, bowed himself and thanked the king. And Joab said, today thy servant knoweth that I have found grace in thy sight, my lord, O king, in that the king hath fulfilled the request of his servant. I'm impressed, as I am sure you are, at the extreme respectful gestures and attitudes and speech people use toward King David. It's partly because that was the norm in an Oriental, ancient world court, but also shows, I think, something about David. People would not dare speak to David in anything but a very respectful way because of his character. He was a man whose character commanded great respect. So we read on. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. But it didn't all go right away, because the Bible adds on, and the king said, let him turn to his own house, and let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. David shuns him after giving the command to bring him back. Now, we're not told why David did this. Here's some possibilities. Conflicted feelings. I mean, after all, Absalom has assassinated David's firstborn son, Amnon. He's a murderer. Should he just welcome him back into his bosom when he's already killed his older brother? Maybe David is afraid for political reasons to appear supportive of a murderer. And so he doesn't want the public to see him welcoming Absalom back. Maybe it's something like that. Maybe David is just unable to reach a decision. This is such a dilemma. David's a very decisive man, but here is a very tricky moral issue. What is the right thing to do? Maybe David just thinks, if I wait long enough, it'll come to me. Maybe if I just wait, I'll postpone a decision about what to do about Absalom now that he's back here in Jerusalem, whether to welcome him back or in my presence or not. I'll wait and see. I'm awfully busy. I'll think about this later. And he keeps putting it off, postponing it. Perhaps that's an explanation why he continues to shun Absalom. These are only possibilities, but there are reasons. Now, the focus of the story turns to Absalom himself, now that he's there in Jerusalem. And we go on to verse 25, and we read, but in all Israel there was no one to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty, his good looks. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. Wow, what a good-looking man. But that reminds us of a long time back when Israel wanted their first king. They thought King Saul was a great king because he was so good-looking. But the prophet Samuel, and later on when he anointed David king, Samuel was impressed by how good-looking Jesse's sons were, but God told Samuel, man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Absalom was a very good-looking man, but God saw his heart. He had a wicked heart to murder his brother for what his brother did against his sister. Interestingly, verse 26 says something about Absalom's phenomenal hair. Verse 26, when he pulled his head, that means he had his hair cut, for it was at every year's end that he pulled it. Imagine getting his hair cut only once a year. It would get pretty long. Because his hair was heavy on him, he had to cut it. Therefore he pulled it. He weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. A shekel was about 4/10 of an ounce. So 200 shekels means his hair weighed about 5 pounds. I can't imagine what 5 pounds of hair would have looked like. I've seen some amazing NFL players, and I wonder with a huge hair, and wonder how on earth do they stuff all of that inside their helmets. But imagine a man with 5 pounds of hair on the top of his head. Now, they did put a lot of oil in their hair back in those days, so that probably added a significant weight. But good grief, 5 pounds. This guy could really grow hair. Now, why is that little verse in there? Because his hair is going to play a significant part in the story a few chapters on. Then the Bible also tells us, verse 27, and to Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of a fair countenance. The 3 sons apparently died in early childhood because chapter 18, verse 18 said he put up this pillar and said, I have no sons to keep my name in remembrance. So they must have died in childhood. And he called the pillar after his own name. It's called to this day Absalom's place. But he had a beautiful daughter. He named her after his sister Tamar. Well, 2 years go by. Verse 28 tells us, 2 full years he saw not the king's face. So there he is, just sitting at home. No, if you can't see the king, he doesn't really have any public duties. He's not out in front of the public. What's he supposed to do? 2 years waiting to be called for a chance to see the king. Well, he does something. He tries to get Joab to bring him into the king. After all, it was Joab who interceded for him to bring him back from Geshur out of exile. So, verse 29, Absalom sent for Joab to have him sent to the king. But Joab would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, he would not come. Joab realizes that it's not politically advantageous for him to take Absalom's side now, since David is shunning him. So Joab won't come. Twice he turns him down. It was political when Joab was in his favor before, and it's political now when Joab won't come see him. So Absalom says to his servants, verse 30, see, Joab's field is near mine, and he hath barley there. It's the spring of the year when the barley is ripe in the land of Israel. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Well, that brings Joab. He rose and came to Absalom into his house and said unto him, wherefore have thy servants set my field on fire? And Absalom answered Joab, behold, I sent unto thee, saying, come hither. After all, I'm the crown prince. Why didn't you obey? That I may send thee to the king to say, wherefore am I come from Geshur? It had been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore, let me see the king's face. And if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. So he demands his chance to see David. And because Joab has access to the king, Joab can intercede for him and get him a chance to see his father and get this settled. So verse 33, so Joab came to the king and told him. And, David says, and when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. A father's kiss tells the whole world, everything is okay now between David and Absalom. Note, this is 5 years since Absalom has gone into exile. He spent 3 years in Geshur, and then 2 years back in Jerusalem waiting to see his father. And this has been 7 years now since Tamar was raped by Amnon. I just throw that out there so you understand that time is slipping away here, going by. Now, as chapter 15 begins, we find that Absalom, now that he has public access and has public approval of the king, he begins to use that to shift public favor in his direction. Because you see, Absalom has a wicked heart, and he is planning to become king now, not until after his father dies. Verse 15, verse 1, chapter 15, 1, it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. So everywhere he goes, it's with this very impressive entourage. And then verse 2 says, and Absalom rose up early. Not just once, but the Hebrew idea is that that this is what he normally does. He used to rise up early. He would customarily rise up early and stand beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, that Absalom called unto him and said, of what city art thou? And he said, thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom would say to him, see, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. So he'd start a friendly conversation. Hey, where are you from? Oh, you know so-and-so. He'd start a friendly conversation, and what are you here for? And the guy would tell him his story. Absalom would shake his head and say, oh, that's too bad, buddy. You see, there's no one here to listen to you. If only I were the king, I would take care of you. You're right. You're in the right here. I would make sure that justice is done for you. But I would help you. But David, he doesn't have time. He won't help you. So he claims that he would make everything right. Verse 4, oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me. I would do him justice. So this is what he's telling everybody every day. He's out there intercepting people on their way in to plead their case before the king. Verse 5 says, it was so that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, bow down to him because he's the crown prince, Absalom, none of that, what Absalom would say. He would put forth his hand. Oh, no, here, take his hand. Don't bow to me. Just hold his hand and pull him over and kiss him on the cheek. Now, we don't do that in our culture, but, maybe in France. Still in the Middle East countries, men still kiss each other on the cheek, as a friendship, like we shake hands. So he's making this show of wanting to be everyone's best friend. Wow. This is working too. He's becoming very popular in Israel. Verse 6 says, on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel, at least quite a few of them. Now, how long did this go on? Well, the next verse should tell us, but it doesn't really. Look at the next verse. It says, verse 7, it came to pass after 40 years. 40 years? Now, how could that be? Well, we'll talk about that more in just a moment. Well, first of all, we see that at the end of a certain amount of time, it came to pass that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. I will do the special worship thing, pay vows and so on. And the king said unto him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. Now, back to that after 40 years. This is an obvious textual copyist error. Really? David, are you saying there are errors in the Bible? Well, not as originally written, absolutely not. But we have to realize that there are very few copyist errors. Now, this is my Bible here. This is published by Nelson Thomas. This is a very reputable publishing company, King James Version Bible. But I have found 3 absolute textual errors in this printing. In the age of computers and high technology, I have found 3 absolute wrong words substituted in my text right here in the Bible. Not looking for them, just accidentally come across them. I'm not talking about mistakes in punctuation. I'm talking about out-and-out substitution of the wrong word. I prove that by looking at other Bibles and saying how other publishers get it right. Mine has 3 errors, and probably your Bible does too. Now, the Word of God before the printing press was all copied by hand. And that's very difficult to do without making any errors at all. Remember that it was all done by hand. They didn't make new copies until the old copy was getting old and hard to read, and maybe some letters accidentally rubbed or worn away, rubbed out, so they were hard to figure out what it was originally said. So there are a few copyist errors that have crept into the Hebrew text from which our Bibles are translated. Now, I'm telling you that because I want to inoculate my class against the wiles of Satan, who uses people who have a little knowledge about a few textual copyist errors and will use that to destroy your faith in the Word of God. If you already know these things exist, you're not going to be stumbled in your faith and trusting the Word of God. So, why do we know it's not after 40 years? Well, that's pretty obvious. David has only been king for 30-some years. His whole entire lifespan is only 40 years, according to different places here in the text. So it can't be after 40 years. We look at the Hebrew text more carefully, and we see that it literally says 40 year, not 40 years. The word year should be plural to go with 40, but in the Hebrew text it's not. What? What happened to the plural? Then we notice, or I've noticed, that if you move the plural ending from years to the word for in Hebrew, it changes the word for to 40. In other words, moving two Hebrew letters from the end of the second word to the end of the first word changes the phrase 4 years into 40 year. So you can see how the mistake was made. Somebody copying the text, under dim light, maybe working late at night, put the two Hebrew letters that would be I am in English at the end of the wrong word and made it 40 year instead of 4 years. So I think originally the text said 4 years. And in fact, there are some ancient manuscripts on this verse that say 4 years instead of 40 year. Finally, Absalom could be in his 30s by now, and David in his 60s, but according to the story, Absalom died before he was 40 years old. So we can't say that he's been doing this for 40 years. Now, Absalom lies when he says he has to keep a vow to God down in Hebron. That's a good lie to convince his dad to let him go. Jerusalem is circled in blue, Hebron in red, so you can see that they're about 20 miles apart as the crow flies. That's a good distance. Hebron, a prominent city, the most prominent city of the tribe of Judah. Jerusalem being right there on the border between Judah and Benjamin, so that's why it's not always originally considered a city of Judah. 20 miles away, and a city of refuge, a prominent city down there, a great place for Absalom to plan and spring his coup against his father, the king. 20 miles away. Remember, there are no telephones, no telegraph, no radio, no way of communication other than messenger between these two cities. And Absalom makes his plans. Verse 10, Absalom sent spies, agents, throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. And then not only that, but verse 11 says, and with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, they were invited to go, and they went in their simplicity, in their innocence. They knew not anything. They didn't realize that Absalom was going to launch his attempt to overthrow the kingdom down there in Hebron. So Absalom did this for several reasons, of course. One is, it makes it look like he's really sincerely going to worship God because he's inviting people that love the Lord and love King David to go with him, and also removes 200 possible defenders away from David when they're going to be out of Jerusalem. And then, this is his really clever move, verse 12, and Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices. So he is putting on this show of worship there down there, offering sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. Now Ahithophel, as we're going to see, is a brilliant counselor. It gives brilliant, perfect advice. And this is really scary for David, to have Ahithophel on Absalom's side. Well, fortunately, and God is behind this, despite Absalom's efforts not to let any news get out of Hebron, somebody on David's side slips away from Hebron and runs the 20 miles north to Jerusalem to warn David just in time. There came a messenger to David saying, "The hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom." And David immediately decides to flee while he still can. David said unto all his servants that were with him in Jerusalem, "Arise, let us flee, for we shall not escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring evil upon us and smite the city with the edge of the sword." There's no standing army in Jerusalem. Absalom is coming, as we find out later, with maybe 15,000 men or more. And whatever men David has with him, the palace guard, a few hundred men there, they're going to be completely overwhelmed by Absalom's men, who outnumber him at least 10 to 1. So the obvious thing to do is to flee, to get out of Jerusalem, avoid being trapped in the city. David probably remembers his days as an outlaw when he had to avoid being trapped in cities by Saul's men. Verse 15, the king's servants said, "Behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint." And the king went forth, and all his household after him, wives, children, everybody. But the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. And that's going to be significant in another next chapter. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off. That is, the intention was to go to a place far off. It takes a while to get there. Now here's the palace guard. Verse 18, and all his servants passed on beside him, all the Kerethites or Cherethites, all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, which were 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. So who are these people? Well, the Kerethites, some people call it Cherethites, they're named as a branch of the Philistines in 3 other places in Old Testament books. So maybe these were like mercenaries, people from Philistia. The Pelethites, we don't know anything about them, but perhaps they were another group of mercenary soldiers. They don't sound like Israelites. And then 600 Gittites. Now, the word Gittite is the Hebrew word for someone who is from Gath. If you're from Gath, that makes you a Gittite in the Hebrew language. So does David really have a Philistine bodyguard? Well, sometimes in ancient times, kings did like to have bodyguards of outsiders. You think of, if you go to the city of Rome today, you find out that the papal city is still guarded by what? Swiss guards. It goes back for centuries ago when a bunch of Swiss soldiers were the guards, the official guards, and they laid down their lives to protect the Pope. And so they have that honor today. Instead of his own native Italians, the Pope is guarded by Swiss guards. So I think these are loyal Philistine mercenaries, and I want to make a point about this. They're on David's side. Verse 19. Now these are mistakenly construed by some to be his old outlaw band of 600 men, because they did visit Gath with David briefly in 1 Samuel 27:2. So they think, they're called Gittites because they were in Gath for a stay. But that was more than 30 years before this, so I don't think that's a good reason. I think these are more likely actual Philistine converts from Gath that have decided to put their trust in the true God, the God of Israel. And I'll tell you why. Look what David says to them. Verse 19, Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, he is the leader of the Gittites, Wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, the new king, Absalom. For thou art a stranger and also an exile. This man, he's a foreigner. He's an exile in Israel. David wouldn't say that to a native-born Israelite. Look what else he says to him. Verse 20, Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down, and so on? You came yesterday. Of course, that's an exaggeration, but David's point is, you're a newcomer. And he says, Take back thy brethren, mercy and truth be with thee. So his 600 men under Ittai's command, David calls them Ittai's brethren, his relatives. That's the way of saying, they're Philistines just like you are. And then he says, take your little ones with you. In other words, they're immigrants. This is emphasizing that they're immigrants to Israel. Now, Scripture records people from places like Ammon, Moab, Edom, Egypt, countries surrounding Israel, coming and putting their trust in the God of Israel. So, why could Philistines, some of the Philistines, obviously not the most of them, but some of them also trust God? God always said Israel's purpose was to enlighten the rest of the world. Abraham knew that. He said, In thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. In Leviticus, Moses said to Israel, If the foreigner that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself, for ye were foreigners in the land of Egypt. God provided, before they ever got to the promised land, that they should let foreigners live with them and treat them as someone born with them. Boaz and Naomi knew this, because Boaz let Ruth, a foreigner, a Moabitess, harvest, or glean rather, in his fields. David knew this. When David spoke to Goliath, he said, I'm going to kill you today, that all the earth may know that there is a God in heaven. God always wanted Israel to make the whole world know who he was. Solomon knew it. In his prayer at the dedication of the temple, Solomon said, Moreover, concerning the foreigner, which is not of thy people Israel, but is come from a far country for thy great name's sake, if they come and pray in this house, then hear thou from the heavens, even from thy dwelling place, and do according to all that the foreigner calleth to thee for, that all the people of the earth may know thy name and fear thee. So, these are men from Philistia, from Gath, that have chosen to be followers of God and put themselves in David's service. That's one group of friends God has put here. The second one is the chief priests. Now there's weeping as they go. Verse 24 says, And lo, Zadok also and all the Levites were with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar, the other priest, the high priest, went up until all the people had been passing out of the city. So here come the chief priests. They're on David's side. But what does David do? He says, Carry back the ark of God into the city. If I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again and show me both it and his habitation. But if he say thus, I have no delight in thee, behold, here I am. Let him do to me as seemeth good to them. So he also says to Zadok the priest, you go back in the city. You've got the two sons with you, Ahimaaz your son, Jonathan Abiathar's son. And see, I'm going to go down and stay in the wilderness, the plain of the Jordan River. That's where I'm headed. I will stay there until you send me messages that it's safe to come back. So they're going to be helping David out as his eyes and ears in Jerusalem when Absalom arrives. So verse 29 tells us they carry the ark back to Jerusalem. So David continues on. Verse 30 gives us a picture of David. He's weeping now. He's got his head covered, a hood over his head, and he's going barefoot. Why? I think just to show humiliation before God. This is like lying prostrate on the ground when he was praying for his son that was about to die. And everybody like him is weeping as they go up, climbing the Mount of Olives on the east side of the city of Jerusalem before they hit the road that takes the trail down toward Jericho and the plains of the Jordan River. David prays now. He hears someone the news, Ahithophel is among the conspirators of Absalom, and his heart sinks. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. David's not so sure about how smart Absalom is, but he knows that Ahithophel is one really smart guy. Whatever Ahithophel decides and tells Absalom to do, that's going to work. So he prays and asks God, turn his counsel into foolishness. By the way, David seems to be thinking about Ahithophel in Psalm 55. When he talks about this person, he says, but it was thou, a man mine equal, my guide and mine acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together. We used to do this. We used to walk into the house of God in company. It really hurt for Ahithophel, his very intelligent counselor, to side with Absalom. But at this moment, who should come along but Hushai, a man that the Bible calls David's friend. David gets to the top of the mount where he used to worship God. Behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and dirt on his head. Unto whom David said, If thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city, and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant hitherto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then, Hushai, mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. So offer your services to Absalom, and you can defeat Ahithophel's advice. And then, verse 35, hast thou not there with thee Zadok and Abiathar the priests? They're on my side. Therefore it shall be that what things soever thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Behold, they have there with them their two sons, two fast runners, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. And by them ye shall send unto me everything that ye can hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city. So I'm sure he got himself all cleaned up, got that dirt out of his hair, and put on unripped clothes, and presents himself to Absalom. And the last verse ends with these words, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. It sounds like David just barely got away in time. Absalom was coming with his 10,000 or 20,000 soldiers already there. So Hushai gets back in time just for Absalom's arrival. Back to Psalm 55, where David's reminiscing about being betrayed by Ahithophel. He said, As for me, I will call upon God, and the Lord shall save me. Evening and morning and at noon will I pray and cry aloud, and he shall hear my voice. Point is here that David has learned from his experience, and he wants us to know that God is a God who hears prayer. Things may seem dark, and this is David's darkest hour of his life. He is only a step ahead of Absalom, so to speak. And yet God is still with him. God gives these indications like Ittai the Gittite, Zadok and Abiathar the priests, and his friend Hushai, that there are some people, some supporters there is some hope that maybe he and his family can get away safely. How will they escape? How will he escape? How will he find refuge? We'll find out next week. But let's pray. Father, thank you for giving us this time together. Help us to remember, oh God, that while bad things can come into our lives, and sometimes it's our own fault, as it was here remotely in David's case, yet God, you are still faithful. And although